Joseph was sold as a slave to a man named Potiphar. Potiphar worked for the Pharaoh, and who was the ruler of Egypt. Potiphar could tell that the Lord had helped Joseph, so he trusted him and put him in charge of his house and everything that he owned. Potiphar's wife liked Joseph. She wanted to break the Lord's commandments with Joseph, and Joseph told her no. One day, Potiphar's wife wouldn't listen, and so Joseph ran away, and she grabbed a piece of Joseph's clothes and kept it. Then she told her husband that Joseph was being mean to her, and so Potiphar put Joseph in prison. Joseph was away from his family, and he was a slave, and now he was a prisoner. But the Lord still helped Joseph and helped the prison guard to be nice to Joseph, and he trusted him, so he put him in charge of all of the other prisoners. While he was in prison, Joseph met two prisoners. There was a baker and a butler who had both worked for Pharaoh, and they had a dream. Through the Lord's power, Joseph explained what their dreams meant. The butler's dream meant that the butler would be freed 3 days later, and he went to work for Pharaoh again. And Joseph told him, "Please remember me when you go to see Pharaoh and tell him about me." But the butler forgot. And so many years later, Pharaoh had a dream that made him very upset, and nobody could tell him what his dream meant. And so he was talking to the butler about it, and the butler remembered that there was a man in prison who could interpret dreams. Pharaoh wanted to know the meaning of his dream, so he called for Joseph to be brought to him. Joseph shaved, cleaned up, and put on nicer clothes before going to meet Pharaoh. Pharaoh told Joseph that he heard that Joseph could interpret any dream. Joseph replied,
"It is not in me. God shall get Pharaoh an answer of peace."
Meaning that Joseph would tell him what his dream meant, but Heavenly Father would tell Joseph what to say. Pharaoh told him about 2 dreams. In the first dream, Pharaoh saw 7 kine, which were cows, come out of the river. They were really fat and would provide a lot of food for their people. Then 7 more came, and they were skinny and weak, so they ate the fat kine. After the kine ate, they were just as sick and skinny as they were at the start. In the second dream, 7 ears of corn popped up out of the ground, and they were fat and good. Then a second stalk of corn sprang up with corn that was withered, thin, and blasted with the east wind. The thin corn devoured the full corn. Joseph explained that the kine and ears of corn represent a time period of 7 years. The fat kine and full corn represented 7 years of really good food before 7 years of no food, also called a famine, represented by the kine and the withered corn. Joseph told him,
"Thing established by God, and God will certainly bring it to pass."
Pharaoh listened to this warning and stored lots of food for the 7 years when famine, or no food, was available. The Pharaoh was so grateful that he released Joseph from prison and made him a ruler over Egypt. When the famine hit, all the people cried to Pharaoh for guidance. He replied,
"Go and choose Joseph, or he's given to you too."
Because they were prepared, Egypt had enough food to feed themselves and the people in the lands around them. Now I want you to discuss these questions with your family. Pause the video after each question for your discussion. What do we learn from these verses about how the Lord blessed the people of Egypt through Joseph? What can we learn about preparing for future emergencies? Discuss what you can do to be better prepared as a family. In the emergency preparedness section of gospel topics found on churchofjesuschrist.org, there's a link in the description below. They have a few recommendations on things that you can do in order to be prepared in an emergency. These things include, number 1, avoid debt and live within your means. Number 2, gain an adequate education. Number 3, keep a reserve of food and other supplies. These supplies include things such as clothing and bedding, drinking water, financial reserves or some cash, important documents, longer-term supply of food items, medication and first aid supply, 3-month supply of food that is part of your normal diet, and ways to communicate with family following a disaster. Maybe you can work as a family to gather some of these things or to make goals towards some of the things that the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints has said is good ways to prepare for disasters. I have another challenge for you. Conference is in a few weeks. Find a way that you can listen to the words of the prophet and do as Pharaoh suggested. What he saith to you, do. For the lesson plan, check out our blog in the description below.